Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Joseph White, and today I want to talk to you about Cinematic Studio Series' Cinematic Studio Brass. Before I dig into things, I'll just play a quick snippet from Howard Shore's Lord of the Rings soundtrack, realized with Cinematic Studio Brass, Cinematic Studio Strings, a bit of percussion from East West Symphonic Orchestra, the good old standby, and some Albion woodwinds, it looks like. Very nice. Very full. I think the first thing I'd like to cover in this review is the overall articulation fluidity. Transitioning between multiple articulations within a melodic phrase with CSB is often a breeze. And I'm a big fan of the way they were able to capture a large dynamic range in the samples while programming everything to be very playable and fluid. And this is something I find lacking in a lot of sample libraries. So, for example, the Prajivkeza Doom snippet I just played for you. The trumpets are switching between marcato, staccato, and legato pretty rapidly. And yet it sounds fairly homogeneous. I can just solo the brass out real quick and show you what that sounds like without anything else. And of course, a great deal of the fullness and the awesomeness of the sound is due to Howard Shore's brilliant orchestration of the theme. I can just also show the trumpets, switching between the articulations will pull up the user interface here while we play it. So yeah, it's really nice. It's really good. While I'm on the topic of the overall melodic fluidity of the library, I might as well cover the fact that they recorded the actual rearticulation samples for note repetitions, and I'm a huge fan of this. It can be triggered by just holding down the sustain pedal and then re-triggering the desired note. And surprisingly enough, this is a feature that many otherwise great libraries are missing. And the fact that they included this is one of the things that sold me on purchasing Cinematic Studio Strings back in 2017 or something, or 2016, back when it first came out. And so, many good melodies are centered on well-placed rearticulation, acting as a melodic pivot into cool harmony or whatever. It's just a very useful melodic idea. For instance, John Williams' theme for E.T. If you play this theme on a library that doesn't include rearticulation, I mean, it's possible, but it could be a hassle. Just you'd have to massage the CC data and stuff to smooth things out because of the note repetitions. Let me pull, if I don't butcher it, I can play that for you on the horns here real quick. Let's see here. Get the horns. I mean, I messed up a note, but you get the idea. It sounds those da 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 da. Super nice. We can do the same thing with the trumpets. It's very, very useful. Another thing I like about the library, and hopefully will be continued into their forthcoming woodwind and percussion libraries, is just the interlibrary congruity that they've started to establish, and the fact that I can write a musical phrase into, for instance, a string section, and then copy the MIDI data over to a brass part, and have to do very little controller adjustment. Obviously, that doesn't just apply to every little detail insofar as the physical differences between bowed versus blown instruments render certain controls irrelevant between parts. For instance, portamento versus slurred legato, which you'd find in the strings. So with CSS, when you're using the advanced legato setting, there are essentially 4 different legato speeds: portamento, slow, medium, and fast. Whereas with CSB, there it's just 2 legato transitions because they don't have portamento for the horns and stuff. And I don't mind this, obviously, because it's realistic, but it does mean that you have to do some adjustment when you're just copying and pasting parts from, say, violas or violins over the horns and trumpets and stuff. And you'd have to either change the timing of the note transitions or the legato speed itself. Otherwise, things could get a little bit out of sync, or you might have like a kind of a glissando effect to the note times hitting. It would sound, a bit like a harp or something. As a bit of an example of rearticulation in parts, as well as the ability to just kind of copy and paste data from strings over to brass or whatever, I have a little snippet of looks like 4 horns or 7 horns and a tuba. And this was a bit of music I wrote for the strings, violins through basses, actually, because it's 5 parts. And then I just copied and pasted it over to the horns and the tuba. And I think the only adjustment I actually made was to turn up the volume of the horns a little bit, just so they stick out as the melody. So I can play that real quick. And it looks like actually it's just 4 parts, but the tuba is doubling with the bottom line. Anyway, whatever. It's super sweet. If I'll just look at maybe a little bit of the rearticulation in the melody here. Oh yeah, that's really nice. So yeah, you get the idea. As another example of kind of the versatility, let's see, what is this? This is the Fellowship theme. Yeah, another iteration of the Fellowship theme from like the Shire or something in Lord of the Rings. Lol. The strings here looks like they're still trying to play staccato. But anyway, the idea is the brass is really good. It's quiet, but it has a nice dynamic swell to it, and you don't really hear any weird phasing. I can just play that soloed as well. Yeah, really good, really good. Let's go to here. Ah, yes, good stuff. I think part of the versatility just comes from the size of the ensembles that they went with, and partially because of the dynamic range that they recorded as well. The ensembles are large enough that they can easily manage really powerful lines of music, while on the flip side, they can get up close and personal. And I'm really impressed with the smoothness that you can hear when crescendoing from pianissimo to fortissimo, and I do believe that that's what they recorded for the dynamics, if not piano to fortissimo. I know that they definitely recorded fortissimo just because of the you can hear the buzz and the umph behind the brass in the Bridge Casa Doom. So even with the solo instruments, you can hear the smoothness. Say if you want to dynamically transition from pianissimo to fortissimo, sometimes phasing can come in, and weird audio artifacts can affect the way it sounds, and they did a good job of not having that problem. So good. Let's try the trombones. As another example of kind of switching between some articulations, in the range of like staccato. So with this, the horns are going back and forth. It looks like between a marcato, just like short staccato, or maybe the repetitions or something. Let me see here. Yeah, so it's sforzando, repetitions, and staccato. Yeah, it's really nice. It's smooth, and very on time. I like that there's little discrepancy between the timing of sforzandos and the staccatos, and even the quicker notes. The amount of delay is somewhat negligent. And as a matter of fact, on the subject of kind of the sample delay of how long it takes to trigger the note of the sample and for the peak of the attack of the sample to hit, they recommend in the manual that you pull back the Cinematic Studio Series instruments about 60 milliseconds. So that's what I've got here, is negative 60 milliseconds on all Cinematic Studio Series parts. And that syncs everything up with other libraries that perhaps have a faster attack for the instruments. So, if you look at the East West Symphonic Orchestra bass drum, there's no track delay, and yet it hits right on time with the Cinematic Studio Series instruments. With so much to like about Cinematic Studio Brass, I really only have two criticisms, and the first being lack of vibrato. Granted, the library includes a sort of light vibrato for the trumpets. If you play just like a solo trumpet, legato, there we go. There's a little bit of light vibrato. It's very light vibrato for the trumpets. To truly maximize the versatility, which again is one of the strong points of the library, I would have liked to have seen or had the option to choose between straight tone or vibrato, especially because they included this feature in both Cinematic Studio Strings and Cinematic Studio Solo Strings. It's The naming scheme of the libraries is kind of funny to me. Yeah, and the second complaint is the inability to control legato volume for all libraries. For the most part, I'm super happy with the preset legato that comes with it. Their legato scripting is by far my favorite in the world of sample libraries so far, but every once in a while I'll run into a transition that's just a bit too loud. Sometimes I've even had some that are a little too quiet. And being able to just turn down a knob a tad to fix that would save lots of time. But otherwise, it's my favorite brass library so far. As opposed to say Cinesample's brass, it's pretty, I guess, dark and chocolatey and smooth. I haven't actually tried Orchestral Tools brass, and I've heard some good things about them. But on the whole, I'm definitely the most pleased with Cinematic Studio brass. One final thought I figured I'd throw out there before I sign off is the price comparison when considering other libraries, and that is it's $400 for a pretty expansive library. We have Berlin Brass, which is €799. I'm not exactly sure what that would be in dollars, but I think it's a lot more than $800. Cinesample's Cine Brass. Let's see, we go to products, brass, Cine Brass complete bundle. Well, it's come down in price. They must be having a sale, but normally it looks like it's $829 for the complete bundle. Spitfire Audio Symphonic Brass is $699. And that's kind of their traditional brass library with all the articulations. I think they recently came out with Spitfire Studio Brass, and I don't know much about that one, but I think it's a lot less in terms of price. If anybody knows anything about the quality of that one, I'd be curious to know. But yeah, price comparison is definitely worth looking at. And furthermore, for anyone who buys their libraries and comes back for more, they usually give, I think it's a 30% discount, and that's pretty good. I don't know if it's exactly 30%, so don't quote me on that. But I'm not sponsored by them or anything. It's just my favorite library, and I think it's right now it's the best bang for your buck. So anyway, with all that said, I hope you have a good week, and I will hopefully speak to you soon.